In today's episode, Will asks, I want to track people from a specific event and the ads I've run and see how many return after the event is over. How do you do this? So this question has two parts to the answer. The first part is that you need to have tagged correctly those people with UTM tags in the ads themselves. If you're using those ads, set individual codes per ad. There's a video that I did, a blog post from back in January called Best Practices for Google Analytics UTM tracking codes that goes through how to set these. And there's also a spreadsheet that is involved as well if you want to keep consistent tagging. But that's the first part of the answer, is you need to have an audience specifically tagged with certain UTM tags so that you can isolate them. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go into my Google Analytics here, and I'm going to actually set up a custom segment for an audience, for a very specific audience. So let's go ahead and call this Almost Timely. And this, I'm going to save that. I'm going to go to Advanced Conditions, and I want, you'll notice all of the different things like campaign are in here, content, ad content, which is a UTM code, keyword if you use the UTM term. For this, I'm going to do a source because I use my newsletter. It has the source of Almost Timely, right? But again, if you had an ad-specific campaign, you just choose campaign or term or content, depending on what it was that you were doing. So this is my segment that I want to keep track of. You'll notice it's 2.74% of my users. And let's go ahead and choose from January onward. You can obviously do this for when the event occurred and then after the event. And now, the second part of the answer is Google Analytics has what is called cohort analysis. This is taking a look at a group of people and seeing how that group changes over time. So let's click on cohort analysis. And we want to track by acquisition date. If the event was like this week, you'd use by day. Otherwise, you could do by week or by month. I'm going to do by week here. And retention is one of the metrics. You can also track goals. How much conversion did you get out of this? How many page views? In this case, retention is a metric of returning users. How many people returned during this time period? And we're going to look at the last 6 weeks. And what you can see here is for people who enrolled in this audience the week of January 20th through 26th, so pretend that was the event week. The first week after that event, or the first week was 94% of the users within this cohort were in that week 0, that week. The second week, 2.67% returned. So that second week, so the week after January 26th, which was January 27th, for this week's audience, 6.67% returned. After week 3, 4%. After week 4, 0. Week 5, 1%. Week 6, 0. So the people who joined my newsletter this week, in January here, kind of fell off after the third week. So that's an indicator that the people who joined my audience that week were not great, right? In the sense of they were not super loyal. If we look down here, the week of January 27th, 8.5% people returned after week 1, 1.43, 2.86, 2.86. So they got to 4 weeks out before they stopped returning based on the newsletter. So they got about 4 weeks of content out of the newsletter before they kind of fell off. Now, we can obviously change this range to be up to 12 weeks, or you can do by month as well. So let's go ahead and do by month here. Sorry, let's do by 12 weeks here. So now looking out 12 weeks. Let's go back to that same week, January 20th to the 26th. You can see here, there's really a decay in that week. That was not a great week. If we look back and look out here, the people who joined my newsletter the weeks of December 16th to December 22nd, or December 22nd to December 29th, they're 10 weeks out. They're still loyal. They're still at 2% here. I've retained those folks. So whoever joined the list that week, those people are sticking around. They're sticking it through. They are loyal to this campaign code. If you were doing this for your event, you would do exactly the same thing. What week was the event? And then track the loyalty of that cohort, that specific group of users, like 70 users or however many were in your campaign, over time to see how they decay. Now, where this gets really interesting is if you have that audience tagged very clearly, and then let's put in a different audience here. I'm going to use, let's use my Twitter. So let's use my Twitter audience, organic Twitter audience. I want to exclude pay-per-click traffic here. And just for clarity's sake, I'm going to switch this back to 6 weeks. Otherwise, the screen gets really hard to read. And now we can compare side by side the newsletter audience versus the Twitter audience. So what we see here is once you get out to week 5, there still are some users within my newsletter audience that are coming back, but I lose all of my Twitter audience after that week 5. And we also see the numbers, 8%, 6%, 9% versus 1, 2, 3, 1. My Twitter audience is not as loyal, and I keep fewer of them than I do my newsletter audience. It's also a smaller audience. If you look, newsletter audience is 538 users, Twitter audience 369 users. So remember that the whole point of analytics and metrics, the whole way to get value out of these things is to compare and contrast, to compare a metric to something else. So if your event was that week, and this is your ad group event, and then maybe this is your social media group for the event, which audience was the better quality audience? Was it the ad group or was it the Twitter group? Now, one thing you'll want to do is make sure that you have exclusions set up so that you're not double dipping somebody who is in your ad group and in organic social group. You have to decide which group you want that person to end up in by excluding the other in the segment settings. So you saw I had a segment setting in there for eliminating PPC. So CPC, PPC, anything with those codes I want out of this Twitter organic audience, so that I'm not double dipping on paid versus unpaid Twitter users. So that's how you do this. The easiest way to report on this is simply to take a screenshot then and just sort of highlight, like, this is the audience and this is compared to another audience. And remember, because it's controlled by Google Analytics segments, you can have up to 4 audiences side by side here. You can compare them over time and see how did this this group of users do over time from a loyalty perspective. Now, this also compares to people who are in other weeks around that event. If you just want to look at the decay of that audience overall, and you don't want to do the cohort reporting, then the easiest way to do that would actually just be to look at new versus returning users. Let's knock out Twitter. We don't need to compare on this. And take that campaign group and look at the new versus returning over time. What percentage comes back over time. You can also, if you wanted to just report on the sheer traffic from that segment only, you would do source contains, or campaign if it's an ad campaign, and user type contains returning visitor. And that will only show the people who are in this campaign and who have come back to the website. So if I save that, you notice it was 2.73, now it's 0.72. So I've lost about 3/4 of that audience. Now you can track just that audience over time and apply that segment to any of the tracking metrics, acquisition behavior and stuff within Google Analytics to see, like, what content does that group of people view versus you could add that segment back in for organic Twitter to compare and contrast. But this would be how you would track those people, just those people who have returned from the ads that you've been running. So a great use case. The cohort analysis is really super. It's an easy way to visualize the performance of an audience versus other audiences or other groups in a campaign. If you want to just drill into that segment, that cohort itself, make sure that you have the campaign tag and the returning visitor tag set up in your segment, and then you can compare and contrast and use Google Analytics just with that segment over time. So great question, Will. If you have additional questions, please leave them in the comments. Otherwise, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and the newsletter, and I'll talk to you soon. Want help solving your company's data, analytics, and digital marketing problems? Visit trustinsights.ai today and let us know how we can help you.